Hey Optimancers, Chris here. I am moving through the hefty Playtest 6 document, and some of the classes are going to be more complicated and less complicated to cover, and in this video I'm covering what I think is going to be the most complicated, the Druid. So, Wild Shape has always been kind of convoluted in terms of the rules. I did a whole video covering some topics where Wild Shape just isn't well worded or doesn't cover things it needs to cover, like what creatures are available for you to Wild Shape into, how to determine the bonuses for skills or saving throws, how hit dice work in regards to short rests or features that use hit dice, and I think most notably, which racial features carry over to Wild Shape and which don't. The Druid and Dnd Playtest, which was in Playtest 4, and that's what I'll be referring to it from now on, introduced new rules for Wild Shape that used templates. Now, I've been a proponent of templates for Druid Wild Shape for years now, and so when I was skimming the document and saw the templates, at first I was super stoked. Then I read the rules, and that dampened my enthusiasm right quick. The templates were totally vanilla. No customization options at all. And they were bad. And you took Wild Shape form and your armor class went down, but you kept your own hit points, you lost all your spellcasting, your class features, your feats, your species traits, your proficiencies, even your saving throw proficiencies, and all of this was replaced with a ho-hum attack, enhanced movement, and keen senses. And I knew right away that people were going to hate this. Oh, and yeah, people hated it. I think it's fair to say that nothing in any of the playtests up to now has received that much hate from the community. Here's how bad it was. So they released this video, which is supposed to announce the Druid and Paladin survey launch, and then discuss the results of the expert classes survey. And of a 36-minute video, Jeremy Crawford spends 27 minutes of it talking about how Druid Wild Shape is getting lots of discussion, and don't worry, we're going to change it. And the survey had not even launched yet. I think templates could have worked if Playtest 4 had given templates ways to customize the types of creatures, the types of land creatures, types of aquatic creatures, and types of flying creatures, so that the players could do things like use webs, entangle enemies, and have poison attacks. If the defense for the Druid had been stronger, if you could have retained the benefit from your feats and class features, I think the community response would have been far more positive. In fact, I'm confident it would have been far more positive. What I don't necessarily know is whether, as a whole, they would have supported it or not, but it definitely would have had a chance. However, based on the response to this version of the templates, I was basically resigned that templates were going to be going away for the Playtest 6 Druid, and yep, templates are gone, and I do not see them coming back. They didn't go back to the 2014 version of Wild Shape either, though. At least completely. And there's some new stuff we haven't seen with Wild Shape before in Playtest 6, so going over Wild Shape is going to be a bigger portion of this video than most features tend to be. But in these videos, what I do is I go over the base class, then I make comparisons to the 2014 Player's Handbook as well as any previous playtest version, though I'm not going to cover everything that went away from the previous playtest version because most of it has gone away because so much of it was based on this Wild Shape that does not exist anymore. Just assume everything I don't cover went away. And then I'll go over the subclasses. And one of the subclasses here, the Circle of the Sea, is brand new. I did a Bard video where I said College of Dance was the only new subclass. That was a mistake. I had forgotten that the Druid also got a new one as well. So I'm going to go over those features and the features of all the subclasses recommended here. Now, one of the subclasses that is going to be in the 2024 Player's Handbook is the Circle of Stars Druid, but there's no revisions here. So basically, it's the version that's in Tasha's. They might do revisions for it later, but for now, it appears they're just going to carry that over. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to go over some overall analysis, and I think I need to do some math for Wild Shape, at least for the Moon Druid. So that's a lot to cover. So let's get started. I think we should start with the class chart, and we see a number of Wild Shape uses gets their own column here. In the 2014 Player's Handbook, you get 2 uses of Wild Shape, and you get them both back if you take a short or long rest. Now we have scaling uses, so you start with 2, you cap at 4 at level 17. Now 1 use is recovered after a short rest, or all uses after a long rest. With playtest 4, this column was called Channel Nature, which could be used to wild shape or something else, and was gained right at level 1. It also scaled much more quickly, with 3 uses gained at level 5, and then 4 uses at level 9. Here, we're waiting until level 17 for the 4th use, so it's 3 uses for a long, long time. With the 2014 Druid, spell preparations were based on your level, plus your wisdom modifier. Now it's a set amount based on your level, and of course, in the playtest 4 version, it used the now abandoned preparations by spell slot. These preparations can be changed after a long rest. With proficiencies, the weapon proficiency for druids is now just simple weapons, which it was in playtest 4 as well. In the 2014 Player's Handbook, the druid has a list of weapons it's proficient in, and the martial weapon it includes is the scimitar. The scimitar has been a druid proficiency since way back in the D&D editions, so this is a departure from tradition to take that proficiency away for at least some druids, because some druids will have scimitar proficiency, and I will be covering that soon. Personally, I am fine with druids having simple weapon proficiency, and this is definitely more user-friendly, and isn't going to require you to go back in the rules to look at what you're proficient in anymore. I mean, if you have the 2014 Druid's weapon proficiencies memorized, I mean, congratulations, but you have probably wasted your brain space. With armor training, we saw this in playtest 4, and that is that this druid is proficient in light armor and shields. The 2014 Player's Handbook had the infamous medium armor and shield, but the specification that druids will not wear armor or shields made of metal. This is a positive change. I'm really glad they kept it. At first level, the druid gets Druidic. So this is the secret language of druids, and druids have always gotten this, though it used to require a perception check for a non-druid to spot it. Now it's investigation. Doesn't really make a difference. The notable change here, though, is that this includes a free preparation of the Speak with Animals spell. Speak with Animals has the ritual tag, which means you can cast it without a spell slot, though, I mean, personally, I'd be all for druids just being able to cast Speak with Animals without using a spell slot or needing to ritually cast it, but what we have here is 1 extra prepared spell. Then we have a new first level feature, Primal Order, so you choose either Magician or Warden. If you choose Magician, you get 1 extra cantrip from the Primal spell list, and your wisdom modifier is added to intelligence, nature, ability checks. If you choose Warden, you get martial weapon proficiency and medium armor training. So if you want to use a scimitar and use medium armor, or a great sword, I guess, if you want to, you can choose Warden here. I mean, I probably would choose Warden most of the time, unless, what if I'm multi-classed, so I already have medium armor proficiency? Then I would probably choose Magician, but for the regular straight class druid, this is probably a +1 armor class out of the gate, and +2 once you can afford half plate. At 2nd level, the druid maintains the wild companion option for wild shape. This was introduced as an optional class feature in Tasha's, and it was retained in playtest 4, and it's here as well. In Tasha's, the duration was half your druid level, but here and in the last playtest, it just lasts until you finish a long rest. By the way, the Healing Blossoms option for Channel Nature has been removed. Jeremy Crawford said that player response has been that players liked the promise of Channel Nature and the ability to do different things with it, but they weren't very happy with the options that were in that last playtest, including Healing Blossoms. So what we see in this playtest are other ways for subclasses to use the Wild Shape feature, which is Channel Nature basically by another name. Okay, so let's talk about Wild Shape. Templates are obviously gone, and what we have here looks like a whole lot more like the Wild Shape in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Now, the Moon Druid is going to have some features that alter how this Wild Shape works, and I'm not going to be covering those yet. This is just the Wild Shape for base druids in this playtest versus the 2014 Player's Handbook. And I don't think I'm going to worry about comparing it to the last playtest, because that Wild Shape is gone and it ain't coming back and no one liked it anyways. So, first off, here's what's the same as the old Druid. The maximum challenge rating of the beast, unchanged. 1 quarter to start, then 1/2 at level 4, and challenge rating 1 at level 8. And you still can't choose a flying form until level 8. You are going to retain your class features. You retain the benefit of your feats. You retain your intelligence, your wisdom, and charisma scores. You can't cast spells, at least until a very high level. You get the armor class of the beast, and you use the attacks of the beast. So all those things are the same. Now let's talk about the changes. So the number of uses of Wild Shape has changed, and I did go over that already, so I won't bother again. It's now your bonus action to Wild Shape. It used to be an action, unless you were a Moon Druid. You now get to keep any special senses, like Dark Vision. It used to be that those did not carry over. You can now speak when Wild Shaped. You can select swimming forms right at level 2. You used to have to wait until level 4. And for skills and saving throws, now you just use the higher bonus of the Druid or the Beast form. Before, it was this mess of mixing proficiency bonuses and exceptions. This is just a whole lot cleaner and better. With hit points and hit dice, you no longer get those of the Beast, you just keep your own. And I'm going to stop right here and say, all the changes that I've listed so far, I like. Being able to speak while wild shaped is a huge quality of life benefit. I like the new uses that give you 1 back on a short rest. I can turn into a frog now at level 2, great. The saving throw and skill proficiency thing is just going to be so much easier. And basically how I was house ruling it already. And keeping your own hit points and hit dice for druids who aren't likely using these forms as combat forms is just fine. And for those that are, well, they're probably Moon Druids, and they kind of have a compromise built into that subclass that we will go over. So I have a big thumbs up for all of these changes. Now let's talk about some more changes. You now retain the benefit of your species traits. Interesting. So in the 2014 Player's Handbook, there's a terrible rule that says you keep your racial traits and can use them if the new form is physically capable of doing so, which doesn't make any sense. It creates more questions than it answers. Like, is a plasmoid physically capable of becoming a shapeless blob if it's wild-shaped into a wolf? Well, I don't know. Well, now the answer is yes. They can squeeze through 1-inch spaces. Yes, they can, in a wolf form. Changeling wolves can now change their form while retaining wolf statistics. Aarakocra wolves can now fly. Bugbear wolves can attack with reach. There are no more unanswered questions. The answer is yes. Except spells. You still can't cast spells. So, getting all your species traits is weird, but it's at least clear. Though there are some other implications, like, let's say you have a turtle druid that wants to pass as a wolf. Will they really pass as a wolf with that big shell that's providing them the 17 armor class? I mean, they still have the shell, right? The Aarakocra is still going to have wings, right? Anyways, they chose that direction, and it's weird, but I'll give them this. It's interesting. Finally, one more change. And this one is the one I've got the problem with. So, the 2014 Druid can wild shape into any beast form within the restrictions regarding the challenge rating and movement types, as long as they've seen that beast before. This is not a good restriction because who knows what beast your Druid has seen outside of gameplay. But at least you know ones that exist in your campaign world. But you might not know what beasts those are. So now you don't need to have seen the beast before. The beast stat block just needs to exist somewhere in the game. It doesn't even necessarily need to exist in your game world, because if the stat block exists somewhere in the multiverse, and apparently your druid doesn't even need to be aware of its existence, then you pick a number of stat blocks equal to the number of known forms on this chart, and you can wild shape into those beasts when you wild shape. And you can't wild shape into anything else. Whenever you take a long rest, you can switch one of the forms. So, the known forms thing, I am just fine with. You pick the forms outside of gameplay, and then you presumably have those 3, 4, or 5 stat blocks ready to go. And that's fine. What I'm missing here is a curated list. And I guess I can hope that's still the plan. Like, the 2014 Player's Handbook has a bunch of beasts in the back, so maybe this one will too. And have a nice selection for a druid of any level, and then this feature will specify that you choose your forms from that list. And that would be fine. What's here isn't fine. When I pick my 3 known forms, I can select Onyx, a challenge rating 0 huge size cat that's immune to damage. And it is a totally legal selection here, because although my Druid will almost certainly never have seen Onyx, it's a published stat block in an official sourcebook for D&D, and that makes it a valid selection. That's the worst example, but basically as a player, I now have an incentive. And from that example, you can see how strong that incentive is to shop not just through the monster manual, but through every published source, including ones the DM will probably be unaware of, including published adventures, to look for those beast stat blocks that assume some kind of context, like Onyx does. But that context isn't listed in the stat block. That provides traits and abilities that pretty obviously shouldn't be available through Wildshape. And so here, what they've done is they've shoved the onus on the DM to tell the players what sources they can't use. But this feature doesn't even warn the DM that they need to do this, or tell the player to expect the DM to do this, so the DM might end up feeling like the bad guy, restricting player options that the rules say they should have. Never mind all the future published stat blocks, where the designer probably should be considering if that stat block is appropriate for a Druid's Wildshape. And we're just sure that the designers will do that 100% of the time, right? Now, most players don't want to read through 100 sources searching for exploitable stat blocks. But that's where YouTubers like me come in, right? So we're going to do that, give you the worst examples, and best case scenario, maybe advise not actually using this stuff. I know I will. And we know all the other YouTubers are going to do that 100% of the time, right? And not just YouTubers, anyone posting online who's done this stuff. And then a player just does a Google search and bam, they have their list of the most problematic Wildshape forms in the game. And the fix is simple. A chapter of the player's handbook devoted to beasts that are appropriate for a Druid's Wildshape, that give lots and lots of cool options, and have the feature instruct the player to choose their known forms from that list. Hopefully, that's already their plan, but if it's not, I think this is unfair to the DMs out there, and dangerous for the inexperienced DMs. If we want these rules to be friendly to new players and DMs, then I think it's an imperative if this version of Wildshape goes ahead. So moving on, the Druid selects a subclass at level 3, chosen from Circle of the Land, the Sea, the Moon, or the Stars. And I think I see what they did there thematically, and I think it's pretty elegant, I have to say. I wouldn't even have thought of this, but nice job. The Druid gets the standard ability score improvements at levels 4, 8, 12, 16, and 19. At level 5, there's a new feature here called Wild Resurgence, and what this allows you to do is if you've run out of Wildshape, then you can give yourself a use by expending a spell slot. And presumably you're going to expend a first level spell slot to do that. And there's no action, and there's a limit of once per turn, and I don't see any reason why you'd want to do it more than once per turn. So if you are a Druid that uses Wildshape a lot, this is going to be very handy to you. Then on the other hand, you can expend one use of Wildshape to get a first level spell slot. Now this is limited to once per long rest, and I'm not sure why that restriction is in place. It seems to me like this could be fine if it had the same use as converting your spell slots into Wildshape, just allow the reverse as well. But they've limited it to once per long rest, and maybe there's a reason for it that I haven't considered. But overall, I think this is a good feature. At 6th level, the Druid gets their second subclass feature, and at 7th level, another new feature, Elemental Fury. So you choose between Potent Spellcasting or Primal Strike. If you choose Potent Spellcasting, you add your Wisdom modifier to the damage from Primal cantrips. And if you choose Primal Strike, you add a d8 of Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Thunder damage to an attack with a weapon or an attack from your Wildshape form. And I would assume for basically all non-Moon Druids, they're going to want Potent Spellcasting, and Moon Druids are basically all going to want Primal Strike. I'll note that if you're using Shillelagh, you would benefit from either option. At level 9, you get Commune with Nature, which is basically one free spell preparation of Commune with Nature, which is a ritual spell, and a fairly good spell, It's definitely thematically appropriate for the Druid. I noticed this is kind of a theme here with spellcasters at level 9 to just give them a spell preparation. From level 10 through 14, you're going to just get some subclass features and an ability score improvement. And then at level 15, your Elemental Fury feature from level 7 is going to scale. So if you chose Potent Spellcasting, you now also increase the range of any primal cantrip with a range of at least 10 feet by 300 more feet. And if you chose Primal Strike, you now do 2d8 extra damage with those weapon or beast form attacks. Now, as much as range can be an issue for primal cantrips, I'm not sure how often I'm casting cantrips anymore at 15th level. And again, unless I'm a Moon Druid, I don't see making weapon or beast attacks with a Druid at this level either. At 18th level, we're going to get beast spells. And it says, while using Wild Shape, you can cast spells in beast form except for any spell that has a material component with a cost specified or that consumes its material component. In other words, if the material component is costly or consumed. And in the 2014 Player's Handbook, you get a similar feature that just says you can cast spells while in Wild Shape, but not if it has a material component. So you just can't provide material components. And then in the last playtest, they said, actually, you can cast spells with the material component as long as they're not costly or consumed, but you can ignore that component. And the 2014 version and the last playtest version both actually make sense. One of those few cases where Wild Shape rules actually make sense. This one does not make sense. And I looked at the design notes because I'm trying to figure out why they made this change, and they don't list it in the design notes. So they've made a deliberate change here and not explained why they made that change or even acknowledged that they've made a change. And this is very odd because just think about it for a second. If you are wild shaped into a fish, how are you providing a material component? Are you wearing a component pouch? Are you holding a druidic focus? Because those are the two ways that you provide a material component. And it would seem obvious you wouldn't be able to do those things. But they've included in the feature here that you can do those things. And they haven't explained how or why this change was made. So this one seems really odd to me. And at 20th level, we're going to get a new capstone. Now, I'm just going to remind my viewers what the old capstone was. It basically gave you unlimited wild shapes. That's what you got. And I gotta say, I didn't really like the old capstone. If you were a Moon Druid, it was really good. But if you were, say, a Land Druid, then it wasn't so good. And I don't think capstones should be like that. They should be good for every kind of Druid. So I'm glad to see that one gone. In the last playtest, of course, they had the Druid have the Epic Boon feat at level 20. So those are gone. So yeah, they had to come up with something new. And so what they've come up with here has 3 features. The bottom one, longevity, is just that age more slowly thing that used to be a different feature that you gained a couple levels earlier, and nobody cares, right? No one cares about that one. So we're just really going to focus on the 2 kind of main features, Evergreen Wild Shape and Nature Magician. Evergreen Wild Shape, I almost like. Whenever you roll initiative and you have no uses of Wild Shape left, you regain 1 expended use of it. This is a pet peeve of mine. This, you must be out of your resource and then we'll give you 1 back. Just give them 1 back. Just say whenever you roll initiative, you regain 1 expended use of Wild Shape. And leave it at that. I don't get why they insist that you're always depleted on things in order to get advantage from, like in this case, your capstone. Just 1 use of Wild Shape. It's not a big deal. I don't get it. Anyways, and then there's Nature Magician. This allows you to convert uses of Wild Shape into a spell slot. No action required by you. Now, you could already do that with your 5th level feature. You could expand 1 use of Wild Shape and get a 1st level spell slot. And you can only do that once per long rest. Now, this will be in addition to that. So now you can choose a number of unexpended uses of Wild Shape and convert them into a single spell slot, with each use contributing 2 spell levels. You must then finish a long rest before you can do so again. And so, for example, if you are at the start of your day, you're going to have 4 uses of Wild Shape. You could expand all 4 and you give yourself another 8th level spell slot. And that's unusual. Normally you can't give yourself more castings of 8th level spells, but I notice in this playtest they're kind of easing that what used to be kind of a universal restriction. Not so much anymore. So yeah, you can do that. And if you do that, then you can actually take advantage of Evergreen Wild Shape on your next encounter, which is dumb. Just give them the use of Wild Shape. Anyways, yes, it's pretty good. I think this Nature Magician, and so Nature Magician, good. Evergreen Wild Shape would be good if it didn't require you were depleted, and Longevity is fine. I don't really care. Overall, I'd say this is a reasonably good feature. So as I mentioned, the Druid is going to have access to 4 subclasses in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and that'll be Land, Moon, Stars, and Sea. And 3 of them are presented here. So Circle of Stars is in Tasha's, and they're just going to keep it as is. So presumably they're just going to be reprinting it as is in the 2024 Player's Handbook. Or maybe they'll plan some revisions for it later. We'll see, but it's not included in this playtest one way or the other. So we have 3 subclasses, and I'm going to go over Moon last because I'm going to want to talk about Wild Shape as soon as I finish the subclass, and then that'll be part of my wrap up for the Druid. So let's start here with Circle of the Land, and this one is in the 2014 Player's Handbook, and I don't see it played a whole lot. And if these changes go through, I expect that to change, because this is pretty awesome. So at 3rd level, the Land Druid gets Circle Spells. They choose one of the listed land types, and they get free spell preparations and a cantrip, depending on which one they choose. They can also change their selection after a long rest. So with the 2014 Land Druid, the way it worked is there were 8 terrain types. You chose one of them when you became a Land Druid, and then it gave you a bunch of additional prepared spells. And that was set. So once you made your selection, that's what you were stuck with. Here, with the ability to switch them out, what it means is that not only are we going to have a whole lot more prepared spells than other druids will, except for the Circle of the Sea, which we'll get to, but also we will have a far more versatile list, because when we take a long rest, we can actually switch out all those spells. And there's going to be some spells on these lists that are going to kind of stand out to players who enjoy playing druids. Because if you do enjoy playing druids, you probably notice that you can't really get Fireball. I mean, even if you play a Wildfire Spirit, notoriously they took that away after the playtest. Here, Fireball has been included under Arid, so, cross your fingers that they don't take it away, but there it is. And I know a lot of players will be excited to have their druids being able to cast Fireball. Then there's other good spells here as well. Misty Step is a very good spell for a druid, because druids don't have good teleport options. So as soon as you add teleports to their spell list, it's really nice to have that on a druid. I've played a number of druids, and I always am just missing those teleport spells. So very nice to have it there. And then Web under Tropical, that one is a standout as well, and I know a lot of players personally who will be very excited to see Web on the Druid spell list. Now, they could get it before with Circle spells, but they couldn't just kind of switch them out like they can here. So I think this is going to be very popular. Now, I think Polar is probably the one that stands out the least, and it's not that there's not good spells here. Sleet Storm is a great spell, but Sleet Storm is already a Druid spell. So what I'm always going to look for are those spells that druids normally can't get that are also good. And that's why spells like Fireball and Misty Step and Web kind of stand out to me. But just the ability to switch out all these spells after a long rest, I think, is a fairly big buff for the Land Druid, because now after a long rest, they can change all their spells. Other druids, if they're going to get extra spells, like Circle of the Sea can, they can't do that. So in terms of if you want to play a druid that is really good at casting spells, this is a very nice feature. So next up, also at 3rd level, we're going to get Land's Aid, and I like this one. So this actually replaces Natural Recovery. I mean, we still get Natural Recovery, but not until 6th level now, and that's been changed. But instead, we're going to get Land's Aid at level 3, and this gives us another way to use our Wild Shape. So we expend a use of Wild Shape, and then we use a magic action, and then we're going to choose a point within 60 feet, and then a 10-foot radius sphere appears at that point, and each creature within it, if they're an enemy, they're going to take 2d6 necrotic damage with a Constitution saving throw to take half damage. Or if they're an ally, we can pick one ally, and they will recover 2d6 hit points. And then it scales, so at 10th level, it's 3d6, and 14th level, it's 4d6 for both the damage and the healing. So I think this is quite good and definitely worth a use of Wild Shape, because if you think about it, at 5th level, we can convert Wild Shape into a 1st level slot, or vice versa. So Wild Shape is essentially worth a 1st level spell. And if we think about 1st level spells, like if I want to heal somebody with a 1st level spell, well then I would cast either Cure Wounds or Healing Word or something like that, but Cure Wounds would be the most I could heal with a 1st level slot, and that would require touch. It would give a d8 plus my wisdom modifier in healing, and here with 2d6 amount of healing, that's a very similar amount. And so it's healing just as much as Cure Wounds, except it now has a 60-foot range. So that's much better. And then on top of that, we're doing damage. Now, if we look at 1st level spells, like Thunder Wave, for example, does damage over an area. Well, that has no range either. It extends directly from the Druid. And then it has a 15-foot cube, and you do 2d8 thunder damage with a Constitution saving throw for half. Well, here we have a 60-foot range, so much more range, and the 10-foot radius is bigger because that's 20 feet across. Well, the Thunder Wave is a 15-foot cube, and the damage here is just slightly less with 2d6 instead of 2d8. There's no push effect. Like Thunder Wave also has a push effect involved, but here also we have no friendly fire, which Thunder Wave does. So I would say as a damage generator, this is better than Thunder Wave. And so it's better than Thunder Wave, and it's better than Cure Wounds, and those are both 1st level spells, and this combines those effects. So it's like getting the effect of 2 1st level spells, but maybe better all at once with a single use of Wild Shape. And that's before taking into account the scaling here. So I think this is well worth a use of Wild Shape. This isn't the most powerful use of Wild Shape we're going to see with the subclasses, because we're going to be talking about Circle of the Sea that has an extremely powerful use of Wild Shape, but it's definitely better than Wild Shape, and it's probably better than converting it to a 1st level spell slot. And so that means this is a great use of Wild Shape for the Land Druid. So yeah, like this feature, 2d6 damage and 2d6 healing isn't a lot, so this isn't going to be dramatic, but, 1st level spells aren't dramatic either, and I do think you're just going to get more benefit from this than you would with a 1st level spell. And because you can convert 1st level spell slots into Wild Shape now, if you want to use this more times, you can. In fact, you could use it a whole lot of times. You could basically use it whenever you want, and you're probably not going to run out of uses. And if you do, you're going to have ways to deal with that, like converting 1st level spell slots, of which you can get more of, and we're going to get into that as well. So yeah, I like this one. So Natural Recovery has moved to 6th level, and it used to be a 3rd level feature, and it was different. But the old feature, what it did is, if you took a short rest, you would recover half your level's worth of spell slots. So let's say you were 6th level. Half your level would be 3, so you could choose 3 1st level spell slots, or you could recover 1 first and 1 2nd level spell slot, or you could recover 1 3rd level spell slot. And it's basically the same as wizards get. They get Arcane Recovery, and it works identically. And you could do that once per long rest. Now, Natural Recovery is twice as good, I would say, because the second paragraph is the old version of Natural Recovery. So the short rest, and you get half your level's worth of spells back, that's all preserved. But now we add the first paragraph, which says you can cast one of the spells of 1st level or higher that you have prepared from your Circle Spells feature without expending a spell slot, and you can do that once per long rest. So consider this. Let's say you have the Arid Land Circle, or the Arid Land Circle spells. So you have Fireball. Now, at 6th level, you would have 3 3rd level spell slots, so normally a caster would be able to cast Fireball 3 times per long rest. Now, if we take a short rest, we can recover a 3rd level spell slot, so now we could cast it 4 times. That's what a wizard would be able to do. But here, we can also cast it for free once, so we can now cast it 5 times. Wizards can't do that. Sorcerers, even who convert their sorcery points into spell slots, wouldn't be able to do that. This is just more casting than other casters are going to get. And, after the Bard video that I released, there were some comments from people who say that, why would you ever play a Druid now when you could just play a Bard with a primal spell list? And then at level 10, of course, you get the additional spell list, so you have more spell versatility and just as much spells. Well, you don't have this many spells. And in terms of versatility, yes, the Bard will have a better versatility of the spells they can select, but this Druid is going to have way more spells prepared, so they'll have more versatility in spells they can actually cast. So if I wanted to make a spellcaster and just get as many spells that I could know as possible and cast them as often as possible, this subclass is going to outperform every other subclass and class combination in the game that I am aware of. And so when I look at this subclass, I think people are going to flock to this, at least eventually, because it's just going to, in gameplay, have so many more spells to cast. That's going to get noticed. Eventually, people are going to catch on. Wow, this guy sure casts a lot of spells. And I haven't even talked about converting wild shape uses into spell slots yet, which we can also do for even more spells if we want. So, really love this new natural recovery. And yeah, this has really made the Land Druid kind of the king of spell casting. Not necessarily the most powerful spells. If you want the most powerful spells, look at Sorcerer with Metamagic or the new Wizard with Modify Spell. But in terms of just the quantity and versatility of spells, this is pretty much the king. And at 10th level, the Nature's Ward ability provides the Druid immunity to the poison condition and resistance to 1 damage type dependent on which land type they are associated with. The old version gave immunity to poison, period. And you were immune to disease and immunity to the charmed or frightened condition caused by elementals or fae. The big thing was the immunity to poison, and we can't quite get to full poison immunity here. We can get immunity to the poison condition and resistance to poison damage. But the versatility on the damage resistance is nice. This is a far less convoluted feature, to be sure. Then finally, at 14th level, we're going to get another way to use our wild shape, and that's Nature's Sanctuary. And what this says is we can use our wild shape and take a magic action, and then what we do is we cause spectral trees and vines to appear in a 15-foot cube on the ground within 120 feet of ourselves, and they last a minute. There's no concentration involved, and you and your allies have half cover while in the area. What that means is you and your allies in the area have a +2 to your armor classes, and it's going to stack with pretty much everything except for cover. And then your allies gain the current damage resistance of your Nature's Ward while there. And remember that with a long rest, we can change that out to different kinds of resistances. And then it says, as a bonus action, you can move the cube up to 60 feet to an area of the ground within 120 feet of yourself. So if you move or your allies move, you can move your Nature's Sanctuary to continue to protect you. This is well worth a use of Wild Shape. So this is very good. Now, I will remind you that Land's Aid has scaled at 14th level. It's now doing 4d6 damage and healing 4d6. And I still might want to do both of these because Nature's Sanctuary might be something I set up on round 1. And then I might want to use Land's Aid on round 2 and following rounds. And I'm not going to need to do Nature's Sanctuary again. Though the way I read this, I could do it more than once. It doesn't say you can only have one at a time. So if I have some of my allies on one part of the map and some of my allies on another part of the map, I might want to do Nature's Sanctuary twice and give us both protection, though I will only be able to move one at a time because of the bonus action requirement. But very strong feature, I think, and a nice other way to use Wild Shape. Land Druids had this thing before where they couldn't really use Wild Shape other than to Wild Shape. And Wild Shape doesn't scale very well at all. And at any level, unless you're a Moon Druid, it's probably mainly utility. And so we still have that utility if we want it. Remember, we can always convert spell slots, and we have tons of spell slots, into additional wild shape uses if we run out. And now we have two really cool ways to use our wild shape with the Land Druid on top of all the enhanced spellcasting stuff. So Circle of the Land I consider just a huge win. I mean, great at spellcasting, and two really cool ways to use their wild shape other than doing wild shape. And that's kind of exactly what I would want from a druid, that I want to be more of a magician style druid. So congratulations, Wizards of the Coast design team. You have created a subclass that I am super excited to try out. And I think a lot of people are going to be very pleased with this subclass. And I hope they keep it very much as it is once it gets to the 2024 Player's Handbook. But I'm very, very pleased with this. I've never been overly, excited to play a Circle of the Land Druid in the 2014 version of the Player's Handbook. This one, absolutely. I want to play this as soon as I can. Alright, so the brand new subclass, Circle of the Sea. So it's not just water-based, but it kind of includes storms and winds as well. So we start with circle spells, and it's a bit like Circle of the Land, except remember that Circle of the Land has choices and then they can switch their list. Here, this is just the list you get. Still, these are all extra prepared spells, so that is a nice boost, and a lot of these are decent spells as well. And so like Circle of the Land, and like Circle of Stars for that matter as well, we're going to get a different way to use our wild shape other than doing wild shape. In the case of Circle of the Sea, they get Wrath of the Sea at 3rd level. It says, as a bonus action, you can expend a use of your wild shape to manifest an aura that takes the form of ocean spray that surrounds you. The aura lasts for 10 minutes, and there's no concentration on this. So just keep in mind, this is 10 minutes long, probably multiple encounters. It ends early if you have the incapacitated condition, dismiss it with no action, or manifest the aura again. At the end of each of your turns, you can choose another creature you can see within 10 feet of yourself. The target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw against your spell save DC or take thunder damage, and if the creature is large or smaller, be pushed up to 15 feet away from you, and to determine the damage, you roll a number of d6s equal to your wisdom modifier, minimum of 1 die. Of course, I would assume when you get this at 3rd level, it's going to be 3 dice. So 3d6 likely at 3rd level, and then when you get to 4th level, it's probably going to go to 4d6 just about right away, and then 5d6 probably, I would say probably 12th level, assuming you're taking feats all the way along. So at the end of each of your turn, with no action, you're just forcing somebody within 10 feet of you to make a saving throw, or they're going to take 3d6, 4d6, or 5d6 damage and be pushed 15 feet away from you. Or up to 15 feet. You don't have to push them if you don't want to. This seems just very, very good for a single use of wild shape. I mean, I would probably set this up right away, and then I think I would just make sure to have some enemy in my aura at the end of each of my turns, and they'll make a saving throw, and yeah, Constitution isn't the saving throw I would choose, but they're going to fail some of the time, and when they do, they're going to take an okay amount of damage and be pushed, and I'm still going to have my action and my bonus action, and I'm still going to be able to concentrate on spells. This is just extra. So I also think that this might be nice if I combine it with some kind of effect where I want to push creatures into it. Like, for example, maybe I have a sleet storm going and some poor soul comes out of my sleet storm, and then I just move up to them, and then at the end of my turn, I shove them right back in, plus they take damage, then they get affected by the sleet storm right away. This just seems very, very strong. And I almost wonder if the duration is too long, because this is almost too good for a use of wild shape. But a great feature. Really, really good. At 6th level, we're going to get Aquatic Affinity, and this includes 3 things. The first is you're going to get Water Breathing as a free preparation. Okay. I mean, it's a good ritual, but we might have taken it already, but we're going to get 1 additional prepared spell. Then we're going to gain a swim speed equal to our speed, and thematically, totally understand that. And then if you use Wild Shape to assume a form that lacks the swim speed, that form gains your swim speed. Now, I'm not sure how useful that is. I mean, you, like I say, when you're not a Moon Druid, you're probably using Wild Shape. If you're using it for Wild Shape at all, if we're using it for Wild Shape, we're probably using it for utility. And if I want a swim speed, then I would probably just select a form that already had a swim speed. But I guess you can just select any form and it'll have a swim speed, and that's fine, I guess. I think my main issue with this one is if I'm thinking of Circle of the Sea, what races do I think are the most thematically appropriate? Well, I would say the Triton, the Sea Elf, or the Water Genasi. And then I might already get the Water Breathing spell as a racial spell or a species spell, and I am going to get a swim speed. So then I don't get those things here, and all I'm really getting is the Wild Shape enhancement, which I probably don't care about. And what I kind of think would be nice here is if there was something else where it said, if you have a swim speed already, then you get X. Like you get a first level feat selection in exchange or something like that. Because I could imagine that a lot of players who play Circle of the Sea are going to be drawn to species that are already going to have that swim speed, and so they're going to kind of lose out on their 6th level feature, and that would be too bad. But thematically, I totally understand why it's here. Then at 10th level, we are going to get a very, very strong feature. Your Wrath of the Sea confers 2 more benefits while active. Well, as I mentioned, Wrath of the Sea is very, very good. Well, we're going to make it even better. You're going to get Flight. You get fly speed equal to your speed. And this is, of course, you got a swim speed already, so now you'll have a fly speed as well. Only while Wrath of the Sea is active, but remember, 10-minute duration, no concentration, and it's just a Wild Shape to use. You could probably have it up pretty much all the time. In fact, even if you run out of Wild Shape uses, you can convert your first level spell slots into more uses of Wild Shape. So you really could just have Wrath of the Sea if you're in a combat. Your Wrath of the Sea will either be up already or you can raise it on round 1, and you should be able to do that just without limit. So fly speed, basically permanent. And then you're going to get resistance to cold, lightning, and thunder damage. 3 resistances, and they're all decent resistances. So just think about how powerful we've become at 10th level, because pretty much all the time, a creature within 10 feet of us when we end our turn is going to take damage and get pushed, and we're going to have basically permanent flight, and we're going to have 3 resistances, and again, just about permanent. I mean, there's technically a limit on the number of Wraths of the Sea we can do, but in practice, I don't see you ever running out. So, exceedingly good feature, very, very powerful. And finally, at 14th level, we get Oceanic Gift, and we're going to make Wrath of the Sea better again. So, whenever you use Wrath of the Sea, you can manifest it or around one willing creature within 60 feet of yourself, rather than manifesting it around yourself. The creature gains all the benefits of the aura and uses your spell save DC and wisdom modifier for it. In addition, and this is important because you're going to want to do this, you can manifest the aura around both the other creature and yourself if you expand 2 uses of your Wild Shape. Take my Wild Shapes. Absolutely. Instead of 1 when manifesting the aura. So I'm going to have 2 Wraths of the Sea active for the cost of 2 Wild Shapes. Yes, I will do that. Now, there's a limit on Wrath of the Sea that doesn't allow you to do it again. So if you are going to want to, put Wrath of the Sea around your entire party, you can't do that. But you definitely want to do both yourself and another player character because it is so good. And you're going to get it twice for 2 Wild Shapes. That is a bargain. Very powerful feature. And yeah, so Circle of the Sea, really powerful subclass. The level 6 feature, I'd like to see some kind of tweaking there. And frankly, when I look at Wrath of the Sea and everything that gets added to it, it's probably too powerful. But boy, Wizard of the Coast, you've achieved a 2nd subclass out of 2 that I'm dying to play. And now the question is, the next time I get a chance to playtest, I'm obviously going to want to playtest a Druid, and I'm going to want to playtest a Land Druid and a Circle of the Sea Druid. And now I have to choose which one I'm going to play. That's going to be difficult. So yeah, another big win on subclasses, though this one I think needs some tweaking. It's probably too powerful, and the level 6 feature is probably not well in line with the rest. It's like really powerful stuff at level 3, and really powerful stuff at level 10, and really powerful stuff at level 14, and level 6 is kind of ho-hum. So I'd love to see kind of a rebalancing so that it's a more linear progression of ability, but I think it's terrific. So very happy with this subclass as well. And we will complete subclasses with the Circle of the Moon. So this is the one we actually got a version of in Playtest 4, and I actually thought that the version in Playtest 4 was fine. The issue was wild shape sucked, and so when you have a subclass that revolves around wild shape and your rules for wild shape are awful, then the subclass, by extension, is going to be awful. But the features that were in the Circle of the Moon subclass, if it had been applied to a better wild shape, I thought would have been fine. However, we've changed the thematics here, because the Moon Druid in the 2014 Player's Handbook, as well as the Playtest 4, the thematics were, this is a Druid that concentrates on wild shape, and they get elemental stuff at higher levels. And the elemental stuff at higher levels is now gone. Now we're going to focus on wild shape, and then we're going to get some, like, moon stuff. You'll see what I mean as we get through the features. So at 3rd level, we're going to get circle forms, and the old Moon Druid got this as well, where as soon as you get the subclass, you can take challenge rating up to 1. You still have the other restrictions of wild shape, like you can't take flying creatures until level 8, but you can choose challenge rating 1 creatures, and that's really good because there's a lot of very cool challenge rating 1 creatures in the game, and with the old version, this was a problem. And I'm not sure it's a problem anymore, and we'll get into that as we get further in. The other thing that's kind of missing here is the old Circle forums told us that every time we achieved another 3 levels in the subclass, that basically we would take our level divided by 3, rounded down, and that's the challenge rating limit we would have. And that scaling isn't presented here, but it is presented elsewhere. So they've just kind of moved it around for some reason. I'm not sure why. But mechanically, it's going to be the same thing. Then also at 3rd level, we'll get Combat Wild Shape. So Combat Wild Shape in the old Moon Druid lets you Wild Shape as a bonus action. And of course, everyone can Wild Shape as a bonus action now, so that wouldn't really be a feature anymore. And you could heal yourself some hit points by expending spell slots. And that was, it wasn't all that great. Okay, so they're giving us different stuff here, and that's good. Alright, so here are the benefits you get. Armor class, temporary hit points, abjuration spells, and Moonbeam. So we'll just go down them in order. Armor class. When you assume a wild shape form, compare the beast's armor class to your armor class, including any armor you're wearing but not your shield. And while in that form, you use whichever armor class is higher. And I'll tell you right now which one is higher. It's going to be yours. Your armor class is going to be higher almost all the time because the armor class of the beasts are terrible. You have a lot of 11s and 12s, and you're going to easily exceed that. So what you want to do is, when you make that selection at 1st level, you're going to want to choose Warden and get medium armor proficiency and make sure you have a dex of at least 14. And then just with scale mail armor, we're talking about a 16 armor class, which is going to be better than any beast you would ever take. And then if you get half plate, then it'll be a 17. And my assumption is that when that armor is absorbed into your body, when you take your wild shape, you shouldn't have the disadvantage to stealth rolls anymore because you're not wearing that armor anymore. You're just going to get the benefit to armor class. So that's great. And you might think that at 1st level, you might want to take heavy armor training, so then you could wear plate mail, and then you could get an 18 armor class when wild shaped. And you might want to do that if you're a variant human. Because if you aren't a variant human, you're only getting 1 1st level feat, and you want a different feat. Okay, we'll go over that in a bit. But if you are a variant human, that is a way you could go and have even a higher base armor class. Then we have temporary hit points. When you assume a wild shape form, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to the form's hit points, or 3 times your druid level, whichever number is lower. And I'll tell you which one is lower. It's 3 times your druid level. That's going to be lower almost all the time. Unless you're taking like a utility form, like you turn into a mouse or something, then it'll have lower hit points. But if you're taking a combat form, 3 times your druid level is, I would think, pretty much always going to be lower than the hit points of the creature. And then you get those as temporary hit points. And every time you use Wild Shape, you would get more temporary hit points, or they would be replaced if you still had them. And then we have Abjuration spells. Well, in a Wild Shape form, you can cast your Abjuration spells, except for any spell that has a material component with a cost specified or that consumes its material component. And so when I said you don't want to take heavy armor training with your first level feat, that's because you want Magic Initiate, because you want to get the shield spell. Because the shield spell is Abjuration, it doesn't have a material component, so you can cast it, and that's +5 to your armor class as a reaction, lasts the whole round. Obviously, you want to do that. So definitely want to get shield on your character, and Abjuration spells going to be very nice to have. Remember, there's lots of other good spells like Dispel Magic or Absorb Elements that are also Abjuration. So that is a nice little benefit, and it's mainly defensive. Notice these are all kind of defensive. Armor class is going to mean you're going to be hit less often. Temporary hit points means you're more resilient. And Abjuration spells is going to give you additional ways to protect yourself. So resilience of the Moon Druid in Wild Shape is significantly improved over any other Druid. And this is nice because with the old Moon Druid, it was kind of broken because you got the hit points and hit dice of the creature who you assumed. And that was way too much at level 2 and significantly less impressive as you went up in levels until you got Elemental Wild Shape, in which case it was ridiculously impressive again. Here, this is kind of a compromise. You're going to be hit less often. We're going to give you some temporary hit points as a buffer. We'll let you cast Abjuration spells. I think that's a reasonable compromise. We're still going to be reasonably strong defensively while in Wild Shape, but not ridiculously so. So, well done, I think. And then there's Moonbeam. You always have the Moonbeam spell prepared while in Wild Shape form, and you can cast a spell in that form without material components. And Moonbeam is an okay spell. I could definitely see casting it. It's one of those spells where if you cast it and you're going to want to use your action for bites or claws or whatever you would expect to do in Wild Shape form, then you probably want a party that specializes in forced movement. Moonbeam does very well with forced movement, especially things like grapples. Those are really good. I mean, maybe you'll get a grapple in your Wild Shape form, in which case Moonbeam is going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, I like this feature. I think it is a good feature. Now, the old Moon Druid at 6th level got magical attacks, so when they were in beast form, their attacks were considered magical for the purposes of bypassing resistance and immunity. And as I've mentioned a number of times before, it certainly looks like the direction of the game is going to be that kind of resistance and immunity is going to be going away. You're either going to be resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, or you won't be. And whether the thing is magical or not isn't going to make any difference. So what we see are features like that are being changed, so instead you do a different kind of damage. And here we see that we can do radiant damage while we're in Wild Shape, or a regular damage, whichever we want, and we make that decision each time we hit. And I think that is a pretty good way to fix that, because radiant damage is very reliable unless you're fighting celestials or something. So it does mean that our combat Wild Shape forms should have reliable damage, and that's good. And then we have that wording that has been moved to this level for some reason, not sure why, that the challenge rating of our Wild Shape now equals our Druid level divided by 3, rounded down. And like I said, this has always been the case for the Moon Druid, and it's still the case now. It's just they've moved this here for some reason. And this isn't all that powerful at 6th level. Never has been for the Moon Druid. The one thing I'll mention about this Moon Druid is, remember, at level 7, we're going to get the ability to do an additional d8 of damage with our attacks. And that is a nice boost to offensive capability, and we've already gotten a fair bit of stuff defensively, so I'm pretty happy with where this is sitting. Then at 10th level, we're going to get Moonlight Step, and thematically moon, I guess, to teleport. Well, that's, I guess, the case, because this is a teleport, and it's very much the teleport that we see for Eladrin and all that, where you use your bonus action, you teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see, and in this case, we have a rider that you have advantage on the next attack roll you make before the end of this turn. and you can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. You can also regain uses by expending a spell slot of 2nd level or higher for each use you want to restore. So in that way, this is better than, say, an Eladrin or a Shadowkai or whatever, where they have proficiency bonus uses, but once those are done, they have to have a long rest. Here, when we run out of uses, we do have another way to get more uses. And if we are in wild shape, we're probably not casting a whole lot of spells, so we might have those spell slots available to use Moonlight Step again, and there's no action required to do that. So where I see this being really nice is if you could have a form that has like one big attack and it's a charge attack. Then what you could do is at the start of your turn, you bonus action, teleport away from the creature, and then you charge back into it with advantage for one big super attack. That would be so great if forms were available that allowed you to do that, that were level appropriate at this level, and that's going to be a thing we need to talk about. But overall, I think it is a good feature. Not nearly as good as the old 10th level feature that let you turn into an elemental, but if you're going to replace that, I think this is a decent feature. Then at 14th level, we have Lunar Form, and we get 2 benefits. The first is, if we have Moonbeam active, that means we got to concentrate on it. It's a concentration spell. You can move it up to 60 feet at the start of each of your turns without using an action. So that would be very handy if you have Moonbeam active. And Moonbeam does upcast quite well. So it's a 2nd level spell that does 2d10 damage, and you can often spur the damage more than once a round. So you could have a creature take 4d10 damage in one round easily enough. I mean, potentially even more than 4d10, depending how much force movement you're using. And if you cast it with a 3rd level slot, then it's 3d10, 4th level slot, it's 4d10, etc. So I could definitely see upcasting Moonbeam, and this does improve it quite a bit. So I could see using Moonbeam here. And then Shared Moonlight, whenever you use your Moonlight Step, you can also teleport one willing creature. They just have to be within 10 feet of you. Doesn't say you need to be able to even see them or anything, so I would presume you could even teleport somebody on the other side of a wall. Anyway, you teleport it to an unoccupied space you can see within 10 feet of your destination space. And when you have a teleport that can bring along a passenger, I always think that's really good, and I've just seen that come up again and again and again in actual gameplay, and it is a good feature to have. So I think 14th level has done reasonably well for the Moon Druid, and so with good features, I'd love to say right now that when it comes to subclasses, the Druid is 3 out of 3. But I'm not going to say that, because Circle of the Moon, unfortunately, is a miss. And here's the reason why. So if you are playing 3rd level and you play Circle of the Moon, you're going to be just fine. I've done damage calculations. You're going to do decent damage. I'll include those in the video description, by the way. I'm not going to go through all the math here because this is a long video already. But your damage is just fine. And you have all these varied options. So you can turn into a giant spider, and you have spider climb, and you have web, or you turn into a giant toad, and you have a sticky tongue. So there's all this different stuff you can do, as well as delivering good damage. And that's the fantasy of the Moon Druid, is that you have all these varied options that you can turn into that do different things, plus you're this nasty creature that is effective in combat. And at level 3, this will deliver. And what will happen is when you get to level 6, you're going to end up with challenge rating 2 options. Now, you could still select challenge rating 1, but the thing is, they don't scale. So your attack bonus is never going to go up. Your damage is never going to go up. And like you take something like a giant spider and you want to do web, well, if you miss with the web, it does nothing. So it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So you're kind of forced to go into those higher challenge ratings as you go up. But that's a problem because as you go into those higher challenge ratings, there's less variance between the creatures. So all these neat things you could do with challenge rating 1 creatures, you don't have those options with challenge rating 2. And then when you get to challenge rating 3, it's awful. It's awful. All you can really do is be a giant scorpion and attack. And that's about all you can do. And when you get to challenge rating 4, it gets even worse. And challenge rating 5 and challenge rating 6. And when you get to challenge rating 6, by the way, there's one creature and it doesn't do anything special. It just does damage with one attack, so you're not even really getting that big bonus from your extra 2d6 damage because it's only on one attack, and that attack is likely going to miss because also the bonuses to hit aren't scaling properly with the higher challenge ratings. So your chance to hit at level 3 is pretty good. Your chance to hit at level 7, not quite as good. Your chance to hit at level 13 is bad, and it's going to remain bad. And so that fantasy of being this nasty creature that rips apart the enemies is taken from you. And the fantasy that you can do all these varied things with your wild shape in combat also is taken from you. And all you really got left is you can do spells. So you do that Moonbeam, and maybe you can do good damage with that. But is that really what you want to do with the Circle of the Moon? I thought the fantasy was supposed to be wild shape is effective, and it stops being effective as you get into higher levels. And it's not like it stops. It just gets worse and worse and worse. So it's this gradual decline of effectiveness in combat and a gradual decline of the versatility of things you can do in combat, and so it's going to let you down. Now, I can think of two ways this could be fixed. In this playtest right now, this doesn't work, but there are two ways I can think of to fix it. The first is you change wild shape to say that you select your forms from the appendix in the player's handbook, and then you have an appendix in the player's handbook that has at least 5 varied, interesting, effective options at challenge rating 1/4, 1/2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So lots of creatures of all the challenge ratings. And so no matter what level you are, you can look at the appropriate challenge rating, and you have lots of good selections there that do lots of different things and maintain the fantasy of the class. And that is one way you could do it. The other way you could do it is you could not have the challenge rating scale. So just keep the Moon Druid accessing challenge rating 1 forms, which, as I mentioned, have lots of interesting and varied options right now. And then you have a feature within the subclass that scales those forms so that your spider just gets better and better and better, or your giant toad just gets better and better and better. Better chance to hit, more damage, that kind of thing. So that's another way you could do it. But as it is right now, it just doesn't work. So the Druid, I think overall, is a win because, wild shape was already a shambles, and it's probably better than it was, but the Moon Druid still isn't where it needs to be. So it still needs work. But if I want to play a Druid, I now have 2 great subclasses that use wild shape in really interesting ways that do work. And the Druid itself, I had a few nitpicks here and there, and I talked about them already, but overall I think it's reasonably good. So reasonably good base class, 2 great subclasses, some tweaking required, and a major project with the Moon Druid and making that work. So that is the Druid. This has been a very, very long video. Very difficult to make this one. So, wow, am I going to sit back and relax and have some fun. And D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I will talk to you soon. I'm able to do what I do because of the patrons of this channel, and I want to thank all my patrons, of course, but I'm going to call out my Thaumaturge level patrons here. So we have Airhead and Alex R, Vo, Bloody Nine, Atherzone, CJ, Chris C, Clement Brunette, Coral, Dank Train, Dewey Cheatham and Howe, Douglas Reynolds, Eden the DM, Eric Wasserman, FBKO5, Gishlife, Lightfoot, Heisenberger, Jay Gemmel, James Makla, James Sprague, Jean-Baptiste Blanchet, Jeriru, John Matera, Jonathan Zucker, Joseph Van Horn, Justin Times, Lars V, Mark D, Math Guy Dave, Mr. Brett, PCZ, Quicksilver HG80, Ramen Goblin, Scott Parsons, Sig, Speed Shadow, Tazel, Thunderlock, Valaziel, Vu, and William Whittles. Thanks to all of you for your support. And anyone interested in supporting this channel, please check the link in the video descriptions. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.